here today. We are, however, having a very, very interesting discussion on how you can channel that thinking, how can business leader channel that thinking and arriving into something that will make really, really good sense for you, okay? And then I think we're good. So let me just kind of give you a bit of an introduction on who we have here with us today. So Julian Graves is the Chairman and Director of Scale Up Advisory of Collingwood Advisory. I know Julian personally for the last 4 years, and is someone that I've had really, really interesting conversations about the events industry, technology, everything that there is to know in this industry. And I've known of Julian for many, many moons from when I started my career in the events business as someone that knows their stuff. And I have been following him for many years, and he now is part of the Collingwood Advisory team with someone that with Piers Byrne, that I really, really trust in the industry. So I am really, really excited about this interview today. I'm really, really excited about this conversation because I think it's really and highly topical. So Julian, welcome. Do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself before we kind of set the context?
Hi, Ricardo. Firstly, thanks for asking me to join you this afternoon. Yeah, really, really excited about it, and looks like we've got a really good audience. So my background is events and media. Hate to say I've been in it for about 30 years, and that's large-scale events, trade shows, to training businesses, of which I'm an investor in. Confexes, print media, and I've also dabbled with taking a B2C event brand into e-commerce. So a pretty broad experience over a very long time. So I've been through a few crises and recessions, albeit not one like this.
Exactly, and I think no one, in the audience or in the industry has ever been through a pandemic. The situation today, after 4 or 5 weeks in this pandemic, people are asking themselves, when is this going to end? And many others are saying, when things go back to normal, although the big question is, what does the new normal mean? Is a big, big question. But what some people have done, some organizers have done so far, is some have done the pivot, as we have seen. All the organizations and all the individuals are questioning their value proposition, are kind of evaluating, taking the time to really think about what is it that they're going to do. Very interestingly, a subsector of those groups of individuals are thinking, are we really an events business? Right? After they're going through all this process, are we really part of the events industry? And then I think that's kind of what's leading into the very, very interesting conversation that we have here today, because it's about the value and the quality of of what you deliver to your audiences. It's about, again, the business model and perhaps questioning that business model. And many are still unsure. Many are just doing what it's supposed to be done, but they're still unsure. And I guess to enter the conversation, Julian, what should they do? Those that are still on the fence or have done something, what should they do, or what does all that mean right now for someone in the events industry?
That's a couple of questions in there. Clearly times are uncertain, and I think there's a whole host of factors that are coming into play. I mean, one thing we can be certain about is that lockdowns will eventually be lifted, but I think it's going to be a very slow process, and large gatherings are likely to be last out of the blocks. But also, I think we've got to expect that client budgets and balance sheets have been badly affected. So the ability to attend and invest in events of any scale, I think, is going to come under pressure. not just in 2020, but I would urge people to be thinking into 2021 as well. And I think there's also then the propensity for risk. So, and that's both for corporate. For corporates, companies, and individuals. Yeah, will corporates want to protect themselves by not sending people to events? Will individuals be reluctant to go? Speaking personally, for personal reasons, I'm probably not even going to be allowed to go to an event for at least the next 6 months. So when you factor that in, it's uncertain times for the events industry, and therefore I don't think there's any argument that any event business should now be looking at digital pivot and not just in the sense of running virtual events, but looking at how they can deliver value to their customers.
Right, and so there, you and I have been having these chats about the stages under which kind of organizations are now basically all this thing kicked off. So what's happened? So companies go into the stages, and this is a model that you guys have developed, a thinking process, which is about mitigation, habituation, and acceleration. Do you mind expanding a little bit more about, you know, what each of those kind of stages mean? And because I'm sure that many people, my idea is that like many people that are here in this webinar today are going to be finding themselves in either one of those stages, likely still unsure, but it'll be very interesting to hear your thoughts on that process.
Sure. Most events companies are likely to be they're likely to be sitting on customers' cash, and they're sitting on that cash and have been unable to provide the service that they've promised. So, and there are a number of ways to deal with that. One is simply to hold on to that money, postpone an event, or credit that money to a future event, and that will depend on individual terms and conditions. Or the alternative is to find other ways in which those liabilities that is effectively sitting on your balance sheet can be discharged, and that's where virtual comes in. So you're certainly from a sponsor and exhibitor point of view, you've been paid for to deliver a service which is going to deliver a number of different outcomes for your customers, whether that be thought leadership, brand building, lead generation, and there are all sorts of different ways that you can that you can deliver exactly the same outcomes, but you're just going to have to not be able to do it in a live environment. So whilst running a virtual event is one option, and we're working with a whole host of people who've done that and done it extremely successfully, and I'll talk about some of those later. There's a whole raft of digital inventory that you can create that allows you to connect your sponsors and your exhibitors with your audience. So that's the mitigation part of it. In delivering that mitigation, you're also and delivering value to your customers. You're effectively creating a whole raft of new inventory which can have considerable value. So, assuming you execute extremely well, you're getting both your delegates, your visitors, and your sponsors and exhibitors habituated to the value of digital experiences and digital content that you're providing. And in creating that value, you then change the perception of your customers to, not sure digital's really for me, I'm not sure it will deliver on my objectives, to one which is wow, this digital stuff really works. Can we do more of it?
Julian,
Once
just
you've gone through,
sorry to
Ricardo,
interject on that front. So just for clarity purposes, when you refer to inventory, we're referring to either a webinar, a digital connection, whatever. That's what you're referring to, right? Can you expand a little bit about what you define as the inventory that you're looking at in the mitigation stage?
Sure. I probably shouldn't say this because we're in the middle of a webinar, but I think in 3 months' time, the phrase "death by webinar" will become common currency. Digital inventory can be anything from a TV show, a podcast, a blog, white papers, round tables, one-to-one meetings. You can create any connection between audiences through a whole array of different means. What it means is that you don't have to simply virtualize what it was that you originally set out to create. And the key part of that is to go right back to the start and really understand who your customers are and really understand what their challenges are and their needs and their pain points, and then think about the content that you can and should deliver that helps those people in those organizations to get that pain relief, to solve those challenges and to meet those needs, and then match those with the outcomes that sponsors and exhibitors are trying to get, whether that's lead generation and moving people from I don't know, perhaps attending a webinar such as this, and they enter the top of your MQL funnel, and then filtering them through and working with the sponsor and the exhibitor so that you end up with a smaller group of highly qualified and therefore highly valuable leads for a sponsor or an exhibitor that they might actually not have achieved in the live environment. So, and hence where we think there's enormous opportunity for certainly pure play events organizers to sort of change their business model really from one that is predicated on a specific date in a specific location surrounded by four walls to one which is an always on business model meeting the needs of buy side and sell side continuously throughout the year.
Yeah, because I think what we've seen, right, in these 4 weeks, all those that either have gone to, virtualize what the offering they were supposed to deliver, they have had tremendous amount of success, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if it is because people probably or organizations have been used to running webinars that then webinar is the next best option or a middle ground. But I think what you've highlighted, I think is very, very, very important, is that it does not necessarily mean, and I want to reiterate because you've already mentioned it, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to have to run webinars or that is going to have to be webinars. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to kind of move everything online. And then I think, or online, no, that digitalization, and that's kind of why a lot of organizers are get stuck in the vendor discussions as to, okay, how do I create a breakout room and everything. At the end of the day, it's just kind of building that connection. And I know some of the event organizers are working on a one-to-one meetings. Basically, that's what they deliver. And there are multiple ways in which they can deliver that. And I think it's important also for the audience to understand that you can deliver elements either at the top of the funnel, or you can deliver leads at the very, very bottom of the funnel, which you don't really need. One is based around volume. The other one is based on quality, and the amounts of money that one can charge for all that. It varies. And I'm sure that you're going to talk about that towards the end, but I think it will be very, very important to distinguish, because I think there's a lot of sentiment out there that digital is not it's not as profitable, or how can someone just translate some revenue that they generated into the physical, into the digital? And I know that you guys have some aspect about the digital myths, but yeah, just wanted to reiterate that for the benefit of the audience.
Just to go back to the mitigation habituation piece. Just before I joined you, I was talking to a client, absolutely a live events business, pure play conferences 4 weeks ago. Had never run a webinar, and were of the mind that our audience won't do webinars. They don't do digital. It's not for them. It's not for our sector. So we've worked with them for the last 4 weeks. Not spoken to them for about 10 days because they've been really busy. So we just had a check-in, and the outcome has been they've gone to webinars. They've delivered a really high quality audience for their sponsors. The result being that they've managed to mitigate all of the liabilities that they had sitting on their balance sheet, and they've managed to do it in 2 weeks of proving to sponsors and indeed to the audience that they can deliver the same kind of value, but just using a different channel. That company is now in a completely different place, where they're now seriously saying, we're not going to run any of our Q4 postponed events. What we're going to do is we're going to push everything out into 2021, get back onto our original dateline, use a whole series of virtual and digital tools that they've now got at their disposal, and they're now moving into acceleration mode, where they're now winning new business. So in a very short space of time, clients that they've been trying to win for 12 or 18 months are suddenly ringing them and talking about very high value packages. So just in 4 weeks, their live event only business has been completely transformed. And these guys were not digital natives 4 weeks ago, but very quickly they've become so, and have been able to demonstrate to the market that they can deliver the same, if not higher value. That's quite an amazing story.
That's pretty interesting, and I might just put in a note there that next week we're going to be joined by Fergus and by 2 organizations that actually have had that similar situation and that similar result, and the business outlook looks very different on our next webinar. So that was a little plug there, but I think it was very important, because the next question, I know people say, so who have done this before, and who's doing it? So can it be done in that short, in that period of about 4 weeks? Julian, do you think how's that?
Well, it definitely can. This particular client has done it, and believe me, they were not in the mindset that they could pivot their business at all, let alone in such a short space of time. I think you're as part of your webinar series, you're speaking to someone else who very quickly virtualize their events. So they've taken a completely different approach. So one, it's been very webinar orientated to start with. Another example would be, we had our event supposed to take place in New York on a certain date. We're going to try and replicate that as much as we can in a virtual events platform. Globally, they would generate about 3,500 visitors to their live events in a year. They went virtual. They turned it around in less than a month, maybe 5 weeks. They had 12,000 signups and 5,000 live participants on the virtual event. They doubled the size of their database, and generated for one client lead value, and the client's a bit strange from it's an enterprise SaaS software offering. So the value of what they were selling was anything from $70,000 up to, well, the value of the leads that they generated for that client, admittedly at the top of the funnel, was in the millions.
Amazing.
So it's absolutely doable. What it also did for this particular company is realise that they've all of a sudden become global. And the only way that they thought that they could go global before was hiring a venue in Tokyo at enormous expense and therefore enormous risk. And before you know it, they've got 200 or 300 absolutely in their target audience people who've engaged with them in a virtual environment. So they've gone global in 4 weeks.
I think that's an amazing feat, and I think that's kind of eases us really well into the habituation stage, and under which okay, you've done it, been there, done it. Now, what does that mean moving forward? And how does that specifically work, Julian, on the habituation element?
Well, I think it's that point of understandably, there's a lot of skepticism. Hopefully, some of those anecdotes and the personal experiences of people in the audience will disprove the fact that that virtualization and digitalization doesn't work. But it's about ensuring that as you go through that process of converting skeptics into advocates, that you really understand what it is that you're delivering, and so does the client. So it's about working with the client all the way through, from really understanding what outcomes that they're looking for, designing a package that is going to deliver those outcomes, then measuring the results of that package, and then playing that back to the client, so that the client really does see what's working, indeed what's not, and how that can be improved. And once the client is then in a place where they go, okay, this stuff really does work, you can then start talking about access to new budgets. I think we'd all agree, in a marketing budget, quite often events are siloed. There's a whole pile of money over here that event organisers very rarely get access to. There's an opportunity to unlock that now, and the habituation process, the demonstration of value that you've created is a key part of doing that. I think one of the challenges that is coming round the corner, though. So it's a bit like the death by webinar that we're all going to feel in 2 or 3 months. Is flight to quality is going to happen without a shadow of a doubt. So what I'd urge everyone to do is to remember what they're good at and why they've become successful, and focus always on delivering what their brand has always said that they're going to deliver, and absolutely focus on doing that at the highest possible quality. So if it's easier, we're all in the events, media, publishing space, so we sort of get it. But the barriers to entry have now completely disappeared. There are no costs to doing this. I could probably launch if I knew how the technology worked, I could run my own webinar on Friday. I could ring some people up in the sector that I know and go, hey, let's have a webinar. And then I could bring some sponsors and go, I'm going to get 50 people in a room. Will you sponsor it? And I can make some money. So the barriers to entry have gone. I suspect that the world is going to get flooded with all of this stuff, and the time that people have available to engage with it, I think is going to diminish. So there's going to be two things going on. So whilst the ability to participate in a real live event is going to be challenging for quite some time, the supply of alternatives is going to go through the roof. So, and at the same time, you're going to have people going back to work in a more normalized fashion. Yeah, they'll might be in the office 2 days a week rather than not at all. So while they're there, will they have the time to do what we're all doing now? I suspect they won't. So poor quality stuff is going to muddy the waters. So everyone should be focusing on, how do we do what we've always tried to do, which is to be number one in the market, and spend a lot of time focusing on that. That goes back to those people who are still evaluating. I think in many respects they're right to still evaluate, to absolutely focus on understanding customers' needs, pains, challenges, so that they get it right when they do it.
Right. Because I think there's two groups of individuals: those that were agile, first to market, bang, big numbers and everything. But there's absolutely nothing wrong for those that are taking the time to evaluate it. In fact, I appreciate those that have done that, and I have to say probably about 20%, only 20% of the people that I have been having conversations with are doing that right now. But I give them credit, because they are the ones that at the time so one is kind of learning by as you go along. The other ones are trying to mitigate that risk by the time they go live, because linking it with the death by webinar and everything, I totally agree. We were talking about this. You only have one chance, probably two. But I know that the people that are signing up on this webinar today, if I've done a bad job in this conversation, they're not going to trust me with their time next time I do webinars. But if I do a good job, then I have it. So, and I think you only have a chance, perhaps a second chance. And I think there's validity in those two approaches, right?
Yeah, and I think speed to market. There are a number of drivers. Yes, let's be first, but also, if someone had an event in at the end of March, they're holding onto a lot of customers' cash, and they've not delivered a service. So there would have been, and definitely, certainly my experience is, a sense of urgency to do something, to avoid a flood of refund requests, which would have severely impacted company cash flows. So there was an immediate commercial imperative to do that. But if you think about it, in the normal world, what it used to be like, you only got two chances anyway. So if you could get away with a mediocre event as a launch, and win people over to having another go, but if you blew it the second time, you definitely wouldn't get another chance.
Yeah, and I think, Julian, there's an aspect from traditional organizers that have been running portfolios of events that have been charging their delegates. Now, this potential thinking is about leads, lead generation, basically that budget, that language, that KPI. So I know many individuals would say, okay, so what about the delegate revenues that I used to get from my events? How does that, is that part of the digital myth, or how does that kind of translate, or how could that be? What could you advise on those people that ask that question?
I mean, to go back to the digital and lever work for our business in our sector, they just went straight for it and put a price against their webinar, and people paid for it.
Okay, good. So
I think it comes back to quality, doesn't it? If you're delivering something of value to your audience, I absolutely think you can put a price on it, and I think people will pay for it. And the proof so far is that stands true. Will Thompson of Gallus Events is he's a great evangelist for this. Just because we're doing it this way, doesn't mean to say people shouldn't pay for it. And I was a little bit skeptical. I'm not a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic anymore. The way that your pricing model might be different, but you can still charge. So I was talking to someone else this morning. They have a freemium and paid for conference model. Interestingly, the people who get access for free are the really important buyers. Interestingly enough, the people who pay are suppliers. So, and they were concerned that that if they've got no live event, how are they going to, will suppliers pay? But if they take it back one step and ask themselves the question, why are those suppliers paying to attend that live event, and understand what those needs are, they can then provide alternative ways of them fulfilling those needs without having to be within four walls. So all of a sudden, they've got a new pool of lead generation clients available to them that actually they hadn't really thought of before. And because of how well they're connected in the market, they could probably create something of really enormous value and benefit to those people that I suspect they'll end up making more money from those paid delegates going forwards than they ever have done.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to reiterate that part as well, that the important link here is when you're saying accessing the different budget pots, which are bigger, larger. Having said that, accessing those bigger budgets means having a different discussion, a different conversation with those budget holders, right? So whereas the event sponsorship budget holder wants to know how many people are going to be attending an event, so perhaps a very simple metric: how many delegates am I expected to have here, or the delegate list, and am I going to have a speaker slot? The digital budget holders are using a little bit more sophisticated language, right? So they're talking about lead conversion rates. How many lead am I looking at, as you were referring to? We always talk about this marketing qualified lead versus sales qualified lead. And what does that mean? Alluding to the example that you've had earlier, that with that sponsor, that what is it worth, the meetings or the date of the leads that they generated, is it worth, well, 20, 30, 40, 50, I don't know. Then again, it's a different conversation. So in a way, and this is my personal view, that then you might as well look at delegate, don't be too fixated in the delegate revenue, because you might then be having another conversation with digital. You have metrics, you have like 10x the amount of insight that you can derive from that participation. So it's, I don't know. Would you say that event leaders shouldn't get too fixated in the delegate revenue generation type of thing when they can explore all these new avenues that it is, or what? And this is my personal view. I mean, I'm just kind of.
Well, I think the opportunity is for everyone to rethink their business model and actually go back to why they started in the first place, which was to deliver value to an audience. And I think as you launch new product and do more things in the market, sometimes it's quite easy to lose sight of what those core customers are all about, and really what it is that they need, and really what outcomes it is that they're striving for. So if you get back to those basics, then you can reimagine what it is that you're delivering and how you're delivering it. So, and that's going to be challenging in different businesses. in a trade show environment where you're used to selling square meters, all of a sudden you have to shift from selling square meters to selling solutions. And that, of course, that is doable. It's eminently doable, and it is being done. But that's a mind shift, a skill set shift, and a behaviour shift internally as well as it is externally. So people should be thinking about what you're doing as an organisation and with your people, and how you behave, and how you whether you're becoming a marketing services organisation rather than we do trade shows.
Right. I think you've nailed it there. The thinking, and then that's kind of where I have been really impressed with those guys that are actually saying, "Are we actually an events business?" And I think they are probably in the right track, and they're driving the right questions. Similarly, and I think on a small scale, you can see like some have gone into product development. I know Piers from Collingwood has gone into the product development, developing a product, so to speak. So we're all going through that phase.
Yeah, we're reviewing. Well, we're not reviewing our business model because it was part of our strategy to develop a business model. What this has done is said to us that we should accelerate that process. So and therefore I think everyone's got the opportunity to do that. So look, if you're whatever line of business you're in, if it's purely live events, at some point they will come back. I think it would be crazy of me to say that they wouldn't, and I really hope they do. Is that going to happen anytime soon? No. Is it going to happen this year? Almost absolutely not. And will that have a knock-on effect into next year? Without a shadow of a doubt, just because what's happening with economies. But when it does come out the other end, I'd be amazed. And someone ran a poll on a meetup group that we run for entrepreneurs. They ran a poll yesterday about what kind of business will you look like in 2022, and very, very few people said we will go back to just being what we used to be before the pandemic. That's a huge opportunity for people. So so I think everyone should embrace it. It's not going to be easy, but you should embrace the opportunity.
Of course, things are not going to be easy moving forwards. It is an amazing conversation. We're having 12 minutes to go, and I think we didn't cover the bit of the acceleration. So it would be great to cover that bit of acceleration, and then we open up for questions. There's a lot of conversation going on in the chat panel, so I am struggling to keep up with it, audience. So please bear with me. And then I've got some questions as well that the audience wants to ask. So can you talk to us about the acceleration bit, and then we can then open for questions?
Yes. So this is, I guess, it's in two parts. One is existing clients' new budget. As we talked about a few minutes ago. We only tend to talk to one part of the marketing budget. If our business model is changing to digital lead generation, then we open up another pot of budget. One of our challenges is we probably don't know who the budget holder is, but we should certainly find out. Here's an example. Again, one of our clients is in the print publishing business as well as the events business. And again, no, our sector doesn't do digital. It's not really what it's all about. They really love their print. So, well, okay, we'll go and ask some of your customers what their media spend is and how they spend it and how they allocate it. And what they discovered was that only 20% of the media budget went on print. 80% of the media budget went on digital. So all of a sudden, it sounds obvious, but when you're in it and you're in the weeds and you're just running your business day to day, you don't necessarily think about it. But there's there's this massive amount of money that's sitting over here that they never even knew existed. They've never been able to access it, yet they've got the primary channel and database to an audience that these companies are spending a fortune at trying to reach. So again, a great opportunity. So it's existing clients, new budget, but then it's also about, dare I say it, winning market share and going after your competitors. So whilst no one likes to make money out of others' challenges, those organisations, certainly in live events, who've not been able to run a live event for the last quarter and certainly for the next quarter, they also will not have been able to deliver the service that they've promised to their customers. Those customers' needs won't have changed. They still need to generate their leads. So there's an opportunity, if you get this right and get your product right, get your inventory right, your delivery, your execution, the experience right, to actually go and say to those companies who are still desperate for leads and can't do it through live events, well, we've got the means to meet those objectives. Why don't we have a conversation? So that's sort of, it's acceleration, but also it's attacking.
Great.
And that's part of growing market share. And I think that's going to be important for 2021. As I say, budgets will be under pressure. So market share is something that people should be thinking about now. They should be talking to their customers now as part of the annual budget cycle and get in early.
Good. I think, Julian, we could talk for hours. In fact, we have been. Unfortunately, we only have 1 hour, but this is kind of what I'm going to open up for. And thank you. This has just been very, very useful. There's again, what I want to say to those that are having those discussions in the chat panel, please bear with us. And if we don't manage to answer the questions, I'll put those questions forward to Julian, and I'll make sure that we do answer the questions. So let me just kind of look into this kind of first question. So what is the outlook for in-person events?
Well, they'll come back, but they won't come back meaningfully, I don't think. Certainly 12, possibly 18 months. And any live events that do run will have smaller participation. There will be lower attendance numbers, which will then potentially undermine the ROI that sponsors and exhibitors will get. So I think it's incumbent, regardless of anything else, I think it's incumbent on media companies to look at alternatives to still deliver that value. I think not doing that will ensure that customers start looking for alternative solutions elsewhere.
Okay. Amanda, I think Julian alluded to the answer about delegate revenue, so I am going to assume and I think that question was answered. There's another question here from Sean Geggs, which is about from the virtual events that you've seen recently, and I'm gonna actually say that, like, you're not a person that is constantly checking or attending virtual events, but probably from the context of the people that you have been working with. What are the new versus made goods for revenue already retained, and how are they pricing sponsorships and attendance relative to the physical events?
I'm seeing all sorts of things. So working with one organisation at the minute, and they have not changed and this is a conference organizer, so if it was £25,000 to be a lead sponsor, they're holding their value. and they might be delivering it through several channels, several different elements of inventory, but they're absolutely not diminishing the amount of money that that they're asking from clients, and in return they're not providing less value. So I'm seeing some hold pricing. I'm seeing others who are actually charging more, and that comes back to your point, Ricardo, about moving through the MQL funnel. And then I'm seeing some who I think are underpricing it, but they're still learning. Right. So I think that's fine. And I think what everyone's experiencing is a tremendous amount of goodwill from customers. It's sort of everyone's in the same boat, and therefore,
agree.
We're all in it together is a bit trite, but everyone's willing to let people have a go, and they want to learn as well. So I think there's an opportunity to test and trial a little bit, and then find your price point. But whatever you do, don't underprice eventually. You can deliver enormous value this way.
Yeah, and I think you hit a big point, because many are thinking just simply translated the same, call it price point or media pack prices on the sponsorship of a webinar or versus an event. And I think there's a fundamental problem is not about a webinar. I think is the value again is an answer. Yes. It's a question of value.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Tina Schneiderman, I think we've answered briefly that question. So I'm going to probably allow other type of questions to be answered, and if not, then I will pass that on to Julian for future answer. So now someone's saying, what are the key changes, if at all, from a B2C environment or from a B2C organizer? Is that the same? Is it variables there?
I only heard this through a third party, but I used to be the managing director of Clarion's consumer division. So and through the third party, I heard that in one of the markets that they were involved in consumer, that they're reinventing in one of their sectors, and therefore, rather than running lots of relatively small events for this particular community, they're going virtual, and they think they'll make more money as a result of this pivot than if they carried on just doing live events. So I think it works in consumer as well, in B2C.
Okay, cool. We only have 4 minutes. I'm going to have one last question. Sorry for those that...
Sorry, Ricardo, just a point on that. Yeah. I think this is where everyone can start and take time over this, but reimagining business models. Going digital, virtual is one step. But if you're in B2C, can you become an e-commerce platform? If you're in B2B, can you, or even should you, become a subscriptions or membership platform? Those are big things to do, but through this process, you should be spending time understanding whether that's a different approach that you can take.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Now, I just want to make sure that there are some questions about, okay, so outside webinars, what other things can be done outside, next year, apart from hybrid models, do you think is it going to work? I'm going to probably answer that on behalf of Julian. And I think that the point of all this model is about understanding your audience. It's not about what specific product is going to hit specific chords. It's not about one size fits all. So if you've done your due diligence with your audience research and understanding what are the key points and everything, then the answer, which is the whole point of this session with Julian, is whatever you come up with, if your sponsors or if your clients buy into it and support that new value proposition, then that's the longer term impact. So Michelle and Ruby, probably I'll answer that to you. And I just want to give a little bit of the final kind of view from another question, which is about the new revenue models as opposed to different pools of marketing spend. Is there anything interesting on that front that you've seen from your experience?
Yes. I'll answer that by suggesting that people go and take a look at a company called TechTarget, which is a lead generation business, as you'd imagine, for the technology sector, entirely driven by really high quality content, and they've created an engine that allows them to really understand tech buyer behavior and develop insights into those buyers that have enormous value for tech vendors. I had a look at their valuation yesterday. They have a 38 times valuation on earnings at the moment, and they don't do live events. All they do is lead generation.
Amazing. Well, Julian, we're running out of time. What I really wanted to say, I am very grateful for you taking the time. I know that you're a very busy individual. I do really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Ricardo. Enjoyed it.
If anyone wants to get in touch with Julian, we've put the contact details in the chat panel. But if you're a B2B media entrepreneur that has questions, I know that Julian and Piers will love to have, I will be very open to have a cup of tea with you and kind of delve more into the topics. I wanted to bring your attention to next week's webinar. So this webinar was about the model, or like the thinking process. Next week's webinar, we're going to see 2 and very likely another 2 more case studies, probably 3-4 case studies on companies that have done exactly as Julian has mentioned. We've got the case of Flume Training. They didn't used to have any digital virtual offering. They're having tremendous success with that in their mitigation stage. We've got Joe from White October Events, which is a really interesting case study, and the future business landscape looks very different, aligned with what Julian's just said. And Fergus Gregory has had huge context with companies that had some success, or very good success, with digitalization, and so we're going to hear his feedback and context around the industry. So I highly encourage you guys to come and attend those sessions, or any of the webinars that we've got coming up. Finally, if you have any question, if you want us, from my point of view, from Brightwell's point of view, to run a free assessment on what you're doing right now, what you're going on right now, or anything about digital transformation and everything, I am very happy to do a free assessment and for all of the attendees of the session. So the link is going to be in the panel. So Julian, greatly appreciate it. It's been amazing. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And take care. Yep.
Take care. Bye, everybody.